Right, well, I'm Bob Kinch. I was born on the 6th of July 1923. I was called up on the 4th of November 1941 when I was 18. And I had to report to the Aircrew Reception Centre at St John's Wood in London. And we were billeted in a block of flats, St James's Close, which was on the road that runs parallel to Regent's Park. They used to get us up at 6 o'clock in the morning, and being November it was very dark then, and we had to form a flight and march just inside the inner circle of Regent's Park round to the zoo, because that's where they fed us. We ate in the what had been the cafeteria, I suppose, in the London Zoo. And we used to have to queue up and walk slowly until we got to the entrance to the mess. And the sergeant would say, 6 minutes. And he wanted us to get our breakfast and get through to the other side and be on parade again within 6 minutes. And we could hear the parrots screeching and the monkeys chattering while we were queuing up to go in there. And from there, I was sent to initial training wing at Cambridge. We were stationed or billeted in Downing College, Cambridge. I think the RAF had taken over half of several of the colleges, and we used to be marched around Cambridge at 120 paces a minute, swinging our arms up to our shoulder level, and we'd go for wireless training and Morse code. We had to go for telegraphy training at one of the colleges, and we used to go to Downing, no, not to Downing, to Divinity for maths, I think it was. We had to go to Jesus College for navigation or something. We marched around all over Cambridge going to different colleges for different subjects. We used to do a lot of square bashing as well. And then I was posted to Sywell, which is just outside Northampton, and that was an EFTS, I suppose, but it was being used as a grading school. I think it was part of Vickers Armstrong. I think they had a place there where they repaired a lot of aircraft, because remember one day we saw a Wellington. It was being flight tested by their chief test pilot, I believe. But we saw it do a loop over Sywell, the Wellington bomber. And at Sywell we were flying, we were learning to fly in Tiger mods. And I think we had to go solo within 12 hours, otherwise we were washed out. I think I went solo in about 6 hours 25 minutes, and we were there for 2 weeks, and then posted to Heaton Park, which was just outside Manchester, and we were there in a transit camp for a while, and eventually got a boat from Greenock on the River Clyde. It was pre-war. It had been used in the First World War as a troop ship. This troop ship, HMT Letitia, Lettia, dreadful boat. Everybody was sick. We had a terrible journey. It took us 2 weeks to get to Halifax in Nova Scotia, and I think we went right down to the Azores and then back up again, dodging the U-boats, and posted stationed for a while at Moncton in New Brunswick. which was a transit camp, and then we got on the train and we sat in the same seat for 3 days going across Canada to get to Alberta, and we stopped at Calgary, and then we were taken up to sort of halfway between Calgary and Edmonton, or somewhere around about halfway, was a village called Innisfail, or a small town called Innisfail, and the aerodrome was called Bowden, B-O-W-D-E-N, just outside Innisfail, and we had Stearmans there. That was the Boeing PT-17 biplane with a radial engine, which was a very nice airplane to fly, and very good for aerobatics. My instructor was an American. He'd been thrown out, I believe, of the American Air Corps for breaking the rules, and he somehow or other managed to join the Royal Canadian Air Force. He was quite a character. He used to take me through a lot of the exercises that the Army Air Corps taught them for flying. They're very, very strict, I believe, the American Army Air Corps. Anyway, I passed the elementary flying training and was posted down at the beginning of October in 1942 to Calgary, 37 SFTS, Service Flying Training School, just outside Calgary, and it was just coming on to winter. The first, I remember on the 10th of October, we got the first flurry of snow, and it was the coldest winter they'd had for 27 years, so everywhere was covered in snow and well iced up, and we couldn't get the engine temperatures up to the recommended temperatures in the handbook, but we still flew. And while I was there, I had a Scottish flight lieutenant who was my instructor. I remember he took me on a low-flying cross-country one day, and we took off and did low-flying all over the prairies and up the river, the Red Deer River, which ran from Calgary to Edmonton, and we flew underneath. It was frozen over the Red Deer River, so it was covered in a coating of snow. And we flew under 3 bridges, went across this river, which was quite exciting. And then as we came up out of we came out of a ravine, having gone under the 3rd bridge, and we did a climbing turn and looked down, and there was a black patch moving slowly through the snow, and we dived down over that. It was a pack of wolves leaping like porpoise in the deep snow, and we flew down and had a look at that. Anyway, I did the complete course on 37 SFTS and got my wings on the 5th of February 1943. We had a passing out parade, and we were given 2 weeks leave with a travel pass to wherever we wanted to go, and I decided I'd like to visit New York and have a look at that. So I had another 3 days going back the other way, but I did have meal tickets and to eat in the restaurant car, and got to New York about 6 o'clock in the morning to the Grand Central Station there. I remember walking out of the Grand Central Station. It was quite chilly and very early in the morning, but not a lot of people about, and looking up at these very tall skyscrapers. Anyway, I contacted a friend of my aunt's who lived in New York, and they put me up for a few days while I was staying there. Went to the Stage Door canteen in New York while I was there, and while I was there, the British ambassador to America, Lord Halifax, paid a visit with his wife and wandered around and said hello to everybody. And his wife said, one of our boys here, dear, and he came and shook hands and had a chat. And from there, when my leave was over, I went to Trenton in Ontario to #1 flying instructor school, where I did the elementary flying training and then the service flying training course, flying Cornell's as an elementary flying training. That was a Canadian-built, I believe. Canadian-built low-wing fixed undercarriage monoplane with an inline engine. Quite a nice little airplane to fly. I had an adventure one day. I was up practicing and doing aerobatics, and the whole of the thing locked up, the controls locked up. I had very little control at all. The rudder would only move an inch or so, and all I had really was the ailerons. So fortunately I wasn't too far from the aerodrome, and I decided that the best thing was not to do the standards circuit procedure, but go straight into the runway that was in use. So I just glided down, kicking it from one side to the other to get it to straighten up, and did a slightly bumpy landing. And when I hit the deck, all the controls came absolutely loose. Anyway, I was called up to see the chief flying instructor, and there were questions about it. I don't think they believed me, but anyway, they took the aircraft in and had a look at it, and they found that somebody had left a screwdriver somewhere down near the tail, which had managed to get hooked up in the control. So I was let off that one. I was in trouble for coming into land without doing the usual procedure, of course, until they found that out. When we came to the end of the service flying training, I had to have an interview with the chief flying instructor, and he asked me what I wanted to do, and I said, well, I've said all along I don't want to be a flying instructor. He said, well, what do you want to do? I said, I'd like to fly Spitfires. And he said, well, I don't think you've got a chance. And then we had a chat about this. He said, I'm going to send you home with a recommendation that you go into Army Corporation. He said, you might fly Mustangs or Aerocobras if you do that. That's about the nearest you can get to Spitfire. Anyway, I came back to England, and there was a reception centre at Harrogate. I remember the sports officer there was a wing commander, Leslie Ames, who'd been the English wicket-keeper in the test matches, which I followed as a boy. And I had several weeks at Harrogate, waiting for a posting to come through. A lot of chaps were posted on to drogue towing and pretty awful jobs. And I wondered what I'd have to do, because obviously they got a glut of pilots, and there were no vacancies at that time on the active squadrons. And I was sent up to a place called, aerodrome called Rossnesi, that was just outside Wrexham. And we had masters there, we flew masters. Not an easy aircraft, masters. They had some rather bad habits. But I quite enjoyed myself up there. Did quite a lot of flying on master 2s, and I think once or twice I flew master 3s. And having been there for a month or more, they posted me down to Yatesbury in Wiltshire, which was a wireless school. And that was a big station just off the main road that ran, the main Great West Road. and it was adjacent to what had been the Bristol Aeroplane Company's flying club in peacetime. So it had living quarters and so on, and a mess. And we were billeted in the rooms there, double bunk, upper and lower bunk, and two of us in a bunk. And I shared a room with a Flight Sergeant Murray. I don't know what happened to him. And during that time, we used to take Proctors, which we flew. That was a low-winged aeroplane on it with a fixed undercarriage, inline engine, and a cabin, which had room for an old-fashioned radio, a valve radio with lots of knobs and dials. And we used to take off and fly these wireless operator trainees for an hour or 2 hours, possibly. And I think when we went up for 2 hours, we flew Perceptors, which had room for 2 passengers, two UT wireless operators. And we had to get up to over 1,000 feet, and then they let down a trailing aerial, which had a lot of lead weights on the end of it. I had to remember to wheel that in before we waited to land. I think one chap did forget one day, and it was a grass aerodrome with Summerfield tracking, which was a sort of wire netting tracking for the runways. And landed, and of course the trailing aerial caught up in the Summerfield tracking, and he pulled up, I think, like a plane landing on an aircraft carrier, which must have given him a bit of a shock. Got him into trouble anyway. And the story was that another one had done a bit of low flying with the aerial down and had gone at right angles to a passing train, and the aerial had hit the roof of the train, and the lead weights had swung in and broken the glass of the train window. So that caused a bit of trouble too. So anyway, I was there for 6 months. The weather wasn't too bad. We had days when the cloud base was so low we couldn't fly at all. We used to play darts in the mess then. But I managed to put in over 360 hours flying on Proctors in 6 months while I was there. And then I got a posting out to Egypt. And we left on D-Day actually. We left from Liverpool. I didn't know, of course, that it was D-Day until later on. And arrived at Port Said and got a train to Cairo, and we were billeted in the hotel at the Palace Hotel, Heliopolis, which had been stripped of all its comforts, of course, and had to wait there to hear what the posting from there would be. Eventually, every morning they read out the postings about 10 o'clock, and if we weren't posted that day, we had nothing else to do. We were right on the edge of the desert where we were. We had to wait for the following day to see whether we were posted, and after being there for 2 or 3 weeks, I was posted to an operational training unit at Ismailia, which was in the desert and quite close to the Great Bitter Lakes on the Suez Canal. And that was on Spitfires and Hurricanes. So that was my initiation to flying fighters, and at last I had managed to get my hands on a Spitfire. I'm just looking to see whether what date that was. I've got my logbook here. 71 OTU, Operational Training Unit, Ismailia, from the 19th of August 44 to the 21st of October 44. During that time I had my 21st birthday, and I was lucky because my mother had a brother who'd been in the First World War. He was in the army, commissioned in the army in the First World War, and I think he must have been stationed out there when the First World War ended, and he married the daughter of a man, he was an Austrian, I think, her father, who'd been on an official on the Egyptian railways. And my uncle married out there and got a job with the bank and worked his way up to being the manager of the main branch of the National Bank of Egypt in Cairo. And he had a flat above the bank, which was on an island block. And I used to go and visit them when I had a bit of time off in Cairo, and they would entertain me. And my uncle kindly took me over to the, I think it was called the Egyptian Union Club on the island of Gezira, where we celebrated my 21st birthday, so that was quite nice. And then from there I got a posting out to India, and I went on a Dakota, an RAF Transport Command Dakota, which was loaded up with crates of things that were being delivered out to the Far East, and we landed at several places, including in the Persian Gulf. We stayed a night, and eventually landed at Karachi, which was still India in those days. That was before it split up into India and Pakistan. And I was at a transit camp in Karachi for a while, and then I was posted down to Bombay and went by train from Bombay down to Worli. Worli camp was just outside Bombay, in a very smelly place, on the train coming into the station there, through a lot of warehouses which had vultures sitting all along the rooftops. Not a very pleasant spot, really. And then we had to spend several weeks there, and then got a posting to a squadron at last, which was on rest. 81 Squadron was the Ace of Spades Squadron, and I think they'd been in quite heavy fighting in Burma, and they'd been sent to Ceylon, a station called Ratmalana, just outside Colombo, which is a very pleasant place. And I don't know how many months I was there, but they had a detachment over at Trincomalee, China Bay, which was on the southeast of Ceylon. There was a big Fleet aerodrome there, which had a Dutch squadron on it with flying Catalinas, and we just had this small detachment there where we had to do a dusk and dawn patrol. I think the fear was that the chaps would come over from Borneo and bomb the harbour there, because just close to the airfield was the Trinco China Bay harbour, which had a lot of oil storage tanks. So we used to take off before dawn and climb up and see the sunrise rather, coming up over Ceylon, which was very pleasant. I think I climbed up to just over 31,000 feet one day as the sun came up, and looked down on Ceylon, which was beautiful. And then while we were at while we were at Colombo, the whole squadron was posted up to an aerodrome in Bengal called Armada Road, and we were told we were going up there on a bombing and air gunnery course, and the rumour had it that we were going to invade Borneo, and the CO asked me if I would mind following the squadron up in a Harvard, bringing a corporal fitter. So he gave me the route and all the landing places where they would stop for refuelling, and I took this corporal fitter and had to find my way up the length of it. It was about 2,000 mile run, I think, from Ratmalana to Armada Road, landing at Madras was the first place where we had to stop. One of the Spitfires had trouble, and so I think we spent a couple of nights at Madras Aerodrome. I didn't actually leave the airfield while I was there. And when we fly, I still remember we spent one night at an aerodrome called Cuttack. I think it took us 5 or 6 days to get up to Armada Road. And while we were at Armada Road, we did this dive bombing and gunnery course. We had they had a bomb rack that held, well, 30, I think it was a 30-pound bomb under the belly of the Spitfire, and we had to climb up to, I think, about 15,000, and the targets were marked out. It's sort of desert-like up there anyway. But the aircraft at the airfield where I was were parked in amongst these red anthills. Some of them were 6 or 8 feet high, and it was really baking hot out there, terribly hot. We had a huge storm there one day where the thunder went on for about 3 days, and there was I think a couple of dormitory blocks with 2 stories, and they were built of mud, sort of adobe mud, on timber frames, and I gather that the termites had eaten all the timber frames away, so they weren't very solid, these things, and there was this terrible thunderstorm and tornado came through the camp, and 2 of these 2-story blocks collapsed, and a couple of airmen who'd been on night duty who were sleeping were killed, unfortunately. That really was a terrible storm, and at the end of that the heavens opened, and it came round it down in stair rods straight down. A lot of people came out of their tents stripped with a bar of soap and had a jolly good shower and wash while that was going on. And having done this course, we were then told that we weren't going to invade Borneo, and that the squadron was going to be disbanded. My memory of what happened exactly there isn't quite clear, but I was posted to 152 Squadron. I'm trying to remember, that which was in Burma. Yes, I don't think 81 had completely disbanded by that time, but I was posted up and had to fly to Burma to join 152, which is stationed at Mike Tila, sort of central South Burma. So I was sort of a new boy at this squadron. My memories of things at Mike Taylor are not very clear, actually, but I know I met Cyril Potter and Jock Gray. I think I've been with Jock at operational training unit actually before. And while I was there, the CO used to get reports from the Chindits who came in from the jungle as to the positions of, where the Japs were based. And I think he was given a map reference, and I think I only went on one operational sortie. We flew for about an hour over solid jungle, and then fired all our guns and cannons into the trees following the CO, and then flew back for another hour to get back to camp, and sort of a solid jungle. You couldn't see a gap anywhere if you had to, if your engine cut. You sort of any slight sputter of the engine sort of turned your stomach over a bit sometimes. Anyway, I was very lucky really got to be into more active action. I think the Jap Air Force had pretty well been shot out of the air by the time I got up there. And then while we were at Tiller, we got news that the Japs had surrendered. So of course everybody, including the CO there, got drunk that night. I think our CO was a teetotaler. He didn't touch anything, but somebody, I think, gave him half a tumbler of whiskey, and I think he passed out in the mess. Most of us had far more than we should have done that night. And then the monsoon came, and I was posted to a transit camp at a place called Sayatquin. And we were in the jungle there for about 2 or 3 weeks, and it rained solidly all the time we were there, miserable. And then from there I was posted back to India. Yeah, my memories are all a bit vague about this too. No, the squadron hadn't disbanded. Then the squadron went down to Tenga in Singapore, and I went on a boat, which was quite pleasant. I had a cabin to myself, and had about 6 or 8 days at sea, going down to Singapore, where we docked. I think there were other couple of boats had docked there before us, and we were one of the first boats to dock there after the Japs had surrendered, and there were Japanese soldiers in uniform with fixed bayonets slung over their shoulders, their rifles were, and they were patrolling the place, I think, to stop looting and so on, until the RAF took over. And a lot of the prisoners who'd been released from Changi, they were in a terrible state, some of them, all skin and bone and very sick. And they came to the docks to see if they could catch some food from us. And we took over a house somewhere near Klang, made it our base to begin with. And then the squadron came down and settled at an airfield called Tenga, which was a bit out of Singapore. And we just did our normal practice flying there, sort of keeping our hands in. One day I was sent up to do when we flew, we were authorised to do certain exercises, and that was all entered in a log, and we had to stick to what was in there. and we were authorised to do formation flying and a tail chase. The tail chase being where you flew in formation in line astern, and the leader did all sorts of antics and aerobatics, and you just had to keep your eyes glued on the man in front and follow them and not lose them. So I was number 4 in this tail chase, and we were herring around all over the sky at about 15,000 feet. And I suppose I was at about 12,500 when there was a hell of a dark shadow and a thud, and I just couldn't see anything. It was a real bang and quite a shock, and my engine just revved like mad. And it turned out that another flight, which had been authorised to do something totally different, were on their way back to the airfield, and the leader of the flight had decided he'd seen us, but he didn't see me, the number 4. I thought he'd do a mock quarter attack on the fellow in front of me, and of course his position ended up just about where I was, and his tailplane had gone right through my propeller, taken off completely the propeller and the reduction gear and the engine cowlings, and the engine just roared like mad, so I switched it off immediately, and everything went deathly quiet. I couldn't see a thing because it was black all over the canopy, so I had to open the canopy to see what was going on, and I undid my straps and prepared to bail out. But having sort of found that the aircraft was gliding reasonably well, because it was the airflow was pretty well broken up by what had happened, and the airframe was stalling a bit on turns at a much higher speed than it would have done normally. Anyway, I remembered my procedure that we've been given for in these sort of instances, and I looked down and saw a grass, well, it was a brown, but it was a grass field below me. I was at about 12,500 feet, so I just did the forced landing procedure that we'd been taught, doing S-turns, sort of figures of 8 on the leeward side of this airfield, until I got down to the right height to turn in, and because I hadn't got any hydraulics because the engine had gone, of course, and I had to land on its belly, so I got in at the right height over the airfield boundary, and got the tail wheel on the ground, and did a straight skid on this brown grass that was there. I got out fairly quickly because there's still got some fuel on board. And as I climbed out, a jeep came up, and it was the station medical officer. He said, "What are you doing? What do you think you're doing?" And I said, "I haven't got your propeller." And he said, "Oh, I thought you were trying to beat up our airfield." So anyway, they took me back to a dispersal, and we phoned base, and the CO came to collect me. I don't think they were very happy about the incident. The leader of the other flight, the chap who'd lost most of his tailplane, was a flying officer, and there was a court of inquiry. He was grounded, I think, for 1 or 2 months, and got a red endorsement in his logbook, and they took a pretty poor view anyway. But I was doing a tail chase and couldn't really take my eyes off the aircraft in front, but I was supposed to have eyes at the back of my head, and I shouldn't somehow have let it happen, but in the eyes of the Air Force. But I didn't get into any trouble for it. And the other chap had a very lucky escape really. He was in a pretty bad way. Of course he'd unstrapped himself. And, he got 2 black eyes and was limping badly for some weeks after. But he did get out in one piece. I had nightmares for about 10 days after that. It really did shake me up. I think these days with health safety and so on, I'd have been taken into a hospital and sort of been given shock treatment and so on. But I was back flying within about 36 hours. Anyway, we carried on flying, just normal practice flying at Tenga for a while, and then we heard that we were going to be disbanded, and I think the flight, I can't quite remember all the details, but anyway, I was under observation in the hospital at Seletar for a while, because I had a recurring very high temperature, and they thought I'd got some obscure tropical disease called Kala Azar. Anyway, some of the top-notch medical officers came and stood around my bed and asked me all sorts of questions, and he examined me, and they decided after all I wasn't going to die just yet. And I stayed there for another week or so. My DMOB papers had come through, I think. The doctor wanted me to go up into the hills in India, but the sort of a ship there probably waiting to take me home was too much for me, and I refused to go, which was foolish really. I think I'd have probably enjoyed it up in the hills. I got home as quickly as I could and was demobbed on the 26th of June 1946 in Blackpool, and the train back down to Worthing where my parents lived. And that's about the story of my war. I probably left out quite a lot of interesting things, but it's probably quite good to get it recorded.